How much blame is there to go around?
Oh, there's plenty of blame to go around. I think I think in retrospect you can see lots of people who were doing stupid things.
Whenever financial calamity strikes, people say, who is looking out for them? In this case, a lot of blame falls on the regulators. The regulators did not keep a careful eye on what was happening on Wall Street. Indeed, in some cases, they looked the other way. The regulators were too interested in watching Wall Street succeed and go from riches to riches. It was the proliferation of this kind of activity that led to the crisis that we found ourselves in 2008.
The idea is at the end of the day, you would have smart people who recognized we were taking on too much risk and who would put some brakes on the system. The brakes didn't work very well this time, in part because some of the smartest people who were closest to the action weren't really at risk.
The fact that Alan Greenspan says, oh, I'm surprised the banks didn't have better risk controls. Well, the purpose of a regulator is to make sure that the banks do have risk controls and that they're aware of what's going on.
Alan Greenspan was a longtime Federal Reserve chief, and in that role, he was incredibly influential in terms of policy and regulation. One of his biggest statements was that he believed financial derivatives, complex investment instruments, were ultimately good, healthy, and safe for the economy. Warren Buffett, the greatest investor in America, said these were weapons of financial mass destruction. And after his term, he was called back to Congress to testify in relation to the financial crisis. In that testimony, he conceded that perhaps he had been wrong about derivatives and the need for greater regulation in the financial system.
We are in the midst of a once-in-a-century credit tsunami. Central banks and governments are being required.
The reason it was so uncomfortable to see Alan Greenspan testifying before that House committee and saying that basically what I got wrong was my fundamental understanding of how the system works. So the things we got wrong were not details. The things we got wrong were major checks and balances and safety valves in the global financial system.
A significant rise in layoffs and unemployment.
At the core of the problem were complicated financial assets called derivatives. These derivatives were placed before ratings agencies who had to rate whether they were really good or really bad. Invariably, they rated them all really good. Unfortunately, there was a lot of very risky, really bad debt in these instruments.
The story of the credit rating agencies is a story of a colossal failure. Millions of investors rely on them for independent, objective assessments.
There was huge failure by the rating agencies who clearly did not understand the things that they were giving AAA ratings to, because suddenly they don't have AAA ratings anymore, and that's a huge failure.
The rating agencies broke this bond of trust.
Rating agencies, one, get paid by the people who are selling the debt, and two, get paid, the more debt that comes, the more they get paid. That is clearly creates a huge temptation to go easy.
While a necessary player in the exploding market, the rating agencies were not the drivers of the train. The engine was powered by the low interest rates that prevailed after the turn of the century. The conductors were the lenders and the investment bankers who made the loans and packaged them into securities. And the rating agencies were the oilers who kept the wheels greased. I might add that the passengers on the train were the investors, and it was standing room only.
This is not just about Lehman Brothers. These problems are not limited to Wall Street or even Main Street. This is a crisis for the global economy.
One of the key moments of the financial crisis is when Lehman Brothers ultimately failed. Regulators had rescued Bear Stearns, but they decided ultimately not to rescue Lehman Brothers. This is now viewed as one of the most radical decisions of the entire crisis.
A lot of people believe that the collapse of Lehman Brothers is what spurred the incredible downturn of the past 8 weeks. When Dick Fuld, the CEO of Lehman Brothers, testified before Congress, the Congress people asked him, why was Lehman allowed to fail? And he got choked up. He had no idea.
This is going to be a question that is going to be debated for many years to come.
The decision of whether or not to rescue Lehman Brothers really ultimately fell to three people: Fed Chief Ben Bernanke, Treasury Secretary Henry Paulson, and New York Fed Chief Tim Geithner. The three of them had decided to step in to rescue Bear Stearns, but in this case, some months later, they felt confident enough that Lehman could fail and not create a catastrophic situation.
Perhaps because they wanted to show that there was moral hazard, that not everybody was going to get rescued. The problem was you wiped out debt holders, you wiped out preferred holders, you wiped out shareholders, and the net result was that really panicked people. And after then, you could see the crisis getting worse.
Everybody in that room, everybody in the Fed realized that this was a very high-stakes game that they were playing, and that the consequences of failure could be really damaging for everybody.
They weren't very good at explaining what they were doing. They have maybe in some of the weekends that they had to make these decisions without enough sleep and without enough preparation, they didn't make the right decisions. My judgment is that when you look at the whole, you look at the enormity of the problem, you look at the inadequacy of the government weaponry to deal with this, that he did a reasonably good job fighting the fire.
I mean, these are some of the most massively complex financial institutions. Not some of these are the most massively complex financial institutions on the face of the earth. To create a structure to, quote, save them in a matter of hours is ridiculous.
My sense is that Paulson had a strategy, a tactic in mind, which is that he wanted to get Wall Street, the rest of Wall Street, Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, JP Morgan, all these other guys involved in fixing this problem, because he saw that the federal government was already being strained, and he felt the need to get them involved. And the only way to do that was to send them a very clear signal that they were going to have to get involved because the government didn't have their back on this one. In the end, I think they would both say in retrospect that it didn't matter, because even if they were willing to do something, they couldn't. They had no options, because Barclays and B of A were not ready and able buyers.
As the crisis worsened in 2008, banks lost confidence in individuals and in other banks. Instead of simply charging higher interest rates, they stopped lending altogether. This led to a vast reduction in credit and led the economy to a grinding halt.
House Speaker Nancy Pelosi signed the $700 billion financial rescue package right after the House passed it by a comfortable margin.
Following the week when Lehman was allowed to fail and Bank of America bought Merrill Lynch and JP Morgan bought Washington Mutual, Congress finally passed the $700 billion relief plan.
But it's going to take a while to get in place a program that, one, is effective.
At some point, there needs to be a longer-term solution. And we're still in crisis management mode. They haven't even started to figure this out, but the entire financial architecture is going to have to be reconsidered as a result of what we've just been through.